It's Tom Kokel here with Rich Morthland, representative from the 71st District. Looks like your knee is recuperating quite well from your rendezvous with the cow.
That's right. It is. I thank people for their thoughts and prayers. And actually, I'm leaving directly from here to go have physical therapy, so I'm recovering well, and we appreciate it. And thank you for mentioning it. Yeah, it's still going to be a few weeks before I'm back to 100%, but they expect a full recovery. And Tom, I just want to say thank you so much for not only doing this, but all that you do to inform the people of Northwestern Illinois. You're a real asset, and we're glad to be able to work with you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Let's just get into, got a couple questions for you that a lot of your constituents have asked over the past couple of years since you've been in office. This is, you were elected in 2011, and some of your committee assignments being on appropriations for higher education, public utilities, cities and villages, counties and townships, adoption reform, higher education, and veterans affairs. Appropriations in Illinois these days is a pretty divisive topic. I know a function of some of your appropriations, supporting policies, for higher education, but it's become increasingly difficult in Illinois now that it ranks, dead last or near the bottom of just about every economic ranking.
Just about everything.
When you consider up here, you've got the funding for Western Illinois University, but yet our community colleges, last year Highland and Freeport received 17%, this year 12% of their budget, and it technically should be 33%. Where do we point the finger here? Is this economic leadership, do you expect from Governor Quinn in the next 2 years of his term, this kind of leadership?
Well, first off, let's talk about higher education appropriations. Very pleased to be on that committee. My wife and I are very much involved with Blackhawk College, which is a part of the community college system. In fact, she's now a dean, and I still teach a couple of classes as I can squeeze them in, just to keep my hand in it because I think it's important. But I'm also the only person on the Higher Education Appropriations Committee who has direct contact on an ongoing basis with the community colleges. In fact, once in an appropriations meeting, somebody suggested, well, let's get higher pass rates at the community colleges. Why don't you raise your admission rates? And I was the only person in the room who knew, not raise your admission rates, raise your admission standards. And there are no admission standards. It's open enrollment for the community colleges. And so, basically if you're breathing, you have a pulse, congratulations, you can become a community college student. And we work very well in spite of that. I understand too that it has been difficult for funding. I will tell you that in the first year, the only area that we didn't cut funding in higher education appropriations was for community colleges. The 4 years took a hit. Those organizations that are private, for-profit, don't receive direct funding, but they end up getting a lot of MAP grants, and we worked on reducing that. But the fact of the matter is, Illinois is broke, and there's just not a lot of money to go around. Now, you mentioned the governor. Sadly, I have to say that my anticipation in regard to funding matters is that for the next 2 years he'll behave like he has for the last 2 years. He'll protect Chicago over downstate. I'm very pleased to say that in my first 2 years, the budget process has been way better than I expected. Compare this to the way it used to be. For about 30 years before I was elected, legislators would just show up on the day they voted on the budget with it on their desk. And congratulations, you have 3 hours to look it over and make a decision. The last 2 years before I was sworn in, there were no line item appropriations. None. They'd just leave town for the summer and say, hey governor, here's how much money's in the checkbook, spend it wisely. So it's not very surprising because in his first 2 years, he had no line items and guidance from the General Assembly to deal with. So he could just spend it however he wanted. Well, contrast that to how we've done it in the first 2 years. And in fact, I will even say I've said more good words about Speaker Madigan than I ever intended to in my life because he did lead the budget process. Here's what we've done. In the 2 years that I've been there, We've made realistic budget and income estimates. And we're not going to spend a dime more than what comes in. We're going to balance the budget. And we have. Then 2, once we've done that, we pay our first bills first, including our pensions and our health care. If that had been going on right along, there'd be a far smaller pension mess than we have to deal with now. And our poor teachers and other public workers wouldn't have to be having sweats over whether or not their pension is still going to be there. And then, once we've paid our first bills, then we take and divide up what's left over among the 5 appropriations committees, and then the committees go through line by line by line and actually talk through in a bipartisan manner. I didn't expect this because I'm in a minority party. We talk through in a bipartisan manner, and we divide up the funds to the best of our human abilities. Is it perfect? Probably not. But if it had been done this responsibly, I wouldn't needed to have gone to Springfield because we wouldn't be in this mess. So we've passed out, and it wasn't as good in this spring as it was the year before because things kind of got weird, and the speaker introduced new legislation again at the last second. But in general, we did a far better job. Now, we've left town with good budgets on the table for the governor. What has he done? Part of the way that Illinois state government works is that our governor has amazing and very diverse veto powers. He can do about 5 or 6 different types of line item vetoes. And what he has done is, in the 2 years, what he has done is he's vetoed out things that he didn't want to spend money on and hoped that he could use them as bargaining chips to get us to loosen up money he did want us to spend money on. That's not a good way to do things, but that's the way he's done. I don't think he's going to stop. And when we look at prison closures, everything he has said in regard to TAMS prison is disingenuous. The reason we have a TAMS prison, in light of the fact that we don't have a death penalty in the state of Illinois, the reason we have a TAMS prison is to protect our guards and our citizens. Because if you go to TAMS prison, which only is made to hold a couple of hundred people and is usually about half full, so it's not going to save a whole lot of money. It's a very difficult place that you send extraordinarily violent, dangerous people who have 500-year sentences and are running around trying to kill guards, or they're gang leaders and they're ordering hits on the outside. These are the kind of people who go to TAMS. Without having that kind of level of security, our guards and our people are going to be in more danger. And so I can't remember what other portions of the question there were.
Well, staying on the prison topic, now that Thompson's gone, which was similar, that was a maximum security prison as well. What is Illinois going to do with the likes of prisoners that are that evil?
Well, I'm glad you said evil, because a lot of these people are. Sadly, Thompson was our state-of-the-art newest prison. TAMS is our second newest. It is a maximum security prison, and it obviously has been sitting empty, and it would have been far better if we could have opened it. But again, you have a governor who would rather keep folks close to Chicago. Stateville was designed by Jeremy Bentham, 19th century philosopher. What did the guy know about designing prisons?
It's great for movies.
But it's not a very safe place to house dangerous people. And so obviously we need to have prison policy that keeps our people safe and also does those people who've done wrong, takes care of them in the way they should be cared for.
Well, regarding the budgets, I know that there are just 6 more seats won by Republicans could shift power in the House.
Would.
And even if it's close, how will that affect the governor's veto power?
Well, certainly what we've seen is that in 2010, we went into it with a 12-seat majority for the Democrats in the House. And I was one of the 6 who cut that majority in half. And I'm absolutely confident that there's a direct correlation between the Speaker behaving a little better than usual, still not great, but better than usual, and the way it would have been, and the way it had been. So if we look at narrowing that margin, or perhaps replacing the venerable Mr. Madigan with someone who hasn't been in there since the Beatles were a band, who hasn't been speaker, with the exception of 2 years, since 1983, and you can pretty well see the correlation of Illinois' decline and his rule in there. I think every seat we tightened it, and of course within your readership area, thankfully we don't have that problem. You know, we have great people. I was just at a luncheon with former Governor Edgar, and wonderful Senator Bivens was there, and he's just, whoa boy, he's great in every respect. Jim Sciascia's awesome. You know, we're looking forward to good things from Tom Demmer in the areas that he's at, but mostly it's Jim and Tim. And you know, so things are pretty right legislatively in your neck of the woods and in the areas that I serve up there.
We still feel the ramifications of Madigan, though. There's no
Of
question.
course. No, because we live in this state where I sit on the floor and it's like there's this black hole on the other side of the room and they're just trying to suck us in. It's you just draw us into the lake. I don't know. But, you know, but the good news is, in all honesty, I mean, this is an election, and we're not electing a governor. We are electing legislators, and consequently, and of course, every seat in the Senate is up because it's a 2-year after following the map. So, although they drew a really ugly map, but the possibility is there that there could be more narrowing, and I think that's fine. I think it's absolutely wrong. But, you know, the reason my wife and I got involved in politics is because we couldn't bear with the re-election of Blagojevich. I can forgive anybody 02, but by 06 we all knew what the guy was, and they threw him down our throats again. And I live by 2 miles inside Rock Island County, which I've always described as Cook County West, and so we were just sitting it out. But we finally said, when they re-elected Blagojevich, and when we were so tired of not having anyone from our own party for whom to vote, we just said, we need to get involved. And dumbest words I ever said were, they won't ask me to run for anything. But they have. And I sat for 2 years on the Rock Island County Board as the only Republican. Great experience. I learned a lot. People say, can you work with the other side? I say, heavens, I had no choice. All right. And now I've spent 2 years in the Illinois House, and I'm really excited about going back, but I think there's a lot more we could do.
Well, you got your work cut out for you. No
We certainly do.
This next question is a little broad regarding private property issues in Illinois. Well, probably bleeds over into the federal level as well. But you know, there's been issues. You're a farmer. You understand some of the EPA regulations that are in many ways harassment. A lot of businesses feel the same way. We just had a situation in Lanark, me being an alderman, where the EPA fined the city because we had a building collapse, and we reacted. We took it down because it was a danger. We got fined for not filing a proper filing of a 10 working day notice. We had a situation up in Apple River, that's not in your district, but where the Department of Agriculture confiscated Terry Ingram's bees because they allegedly had foul brood, but they never gave him a proper hearing. They entered his property, the Department of Agriculture entered his property without notification. It just seems like you know, the House and the Senate give these agencies the power, you know, and the funding to operate, yet it's a dilemma. What is your opinion of that? Do you have any ideas to rein in some of these agencies?
Well, we definitely have a state. We definitely have a state that frequently wages a tax upon its own citizens. And again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but part of it is this dynamic of the folks by Chicago who think they know everything in the world and think the rest of us are a bunch of bumpkins who can't see straight. When the real facts are that we are the ones with our boots on the ground. We're the ones who are out there, who are working our fields. We're tending our crops and our livestock. And as I'm a living proof, experiencing the dangers thereof. And, you know, we're the ones who are actually in it. And I get so frustrated, and I think a lot of it again is going to go back to the governor, gubernatorial appointments. It's also going to come in the legislature. Again, it would be nice to flip leadership, because what are you dealing with there? You're dealing with committee chairs who have in their heads their own ideas of how things should run. As you mentioned, I sit on, and my biggest example would be the adoption committee, where Sarah Feigenholz basically wants to mold all the adoption law in the state of Illinois in her own image. And she and I are both adoptees, and she has one view of it, and I have a very different view of it, but she's the committee chair. And so I'm not going to be able to move legislation. She is. And so those are the two things. We need to have a downstate governor, an occupant of the governor's mansion, who actually occupies the governor's mansion for a change. You wouldn't it? Yes. And then you know, we need to, so we need to have change in leadership. But on the other hand, you know, and let's go back to Senator Bivens. That guy is a genius, and you know a lot about his legislative activities. He looks at it and says, I'm in a minority party. I'm going to work incrementally until we can change the basics, and he does a lot of great work. And so, you know, like for instance, we do some good work. I'm thinking now about business. I'm thinking about the fact that we did extend the R&D tax credit. Didn't eliminate, didn't make it permanent, but we extended it. We doubled the trigger for the death tax. Like to eliminate that as a state tax, but at least it's a little bit more reasonable. We have expanded enterprise zones. We have done some good things, but it's more tinkering around the edges, and you make the incremental changes as you can. But in all honesty, the good news is if we can just do well enough, because you mentioned how we're bottom ranked at so many areas. Well, there's nowhere to go but up. And if we can just keep moving along, yes, I obviously have already said I want wholesale change in government. But if we can just keep making enough changes so we can start moving into the low 40s instead of the high 40s, and start getting some people to pay attention and see maybe there is an opportunity, and that Illinois, for those who want to provide opportunity, business, that's all you're talking about with those people in your question, people who want to just live their lives and make a living, and if we can just get to the place where the state will stop attacking them, then I think we can have a bright future, and people will start to have faith and feel freer to invest in the state of Illinois, which will then turn the engines of growth.
Well, Illinois used to be always in the top 5 for most productive states in the Union, and I believe with our agriculture industry as strong as it is here in Illinois, that's holding its own. It just seems like if we could just get the government out of the way and let business rock and roll, that instead of biting the hand that feeds them, that things would pan out quite nicely here.
Absolutely. And also too, you know, now I live a little bit closer to the border than a lot of your readers, so I'm more sensitive to it. I'm 5 miles from the Mississippi River. But we are a state, we're practically an island, and we have all of these neighbors, and we have so much border material, so much border area. Those of us who live are so keenly aware to the comparative disadvantages that we have with our neighboring states. Heavens, do you know how embarrassing it is to go over to Iowa to buy my gasoline when I have state legislative license plates? Hey. But I do it all the time because I'm going to go save the money. But we just need to keep working. It's not all lost. These are dark, dire days, but I think there's a brighter future ahead.
I agree with you, and I wish you well in your campaign. Any final words before we go?
Well, I really want to thank you, Tom, and I know that that I'll probably do extremely well in the areas where your paper has high circulation. But you know, you reach out to a broader market. You're on the web, and so I just want to remind the people of Illinois, and I want to remind those voters, especially. And I hate to get too partisan, but downstate Democrats, if you vote for, even if you like the guy, you're voting to maintain the power of Chicago. We have to break the back of the Chicago power monopoly, and until we do that, Illinois will never be what it can be. But I think it's within our reach.
Sounds good. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it, Tom. Yep.
How is the cow, by the way?
Sold her.
All right.
I got rid of her.
No more hassles with that one.
Not with that one. You don't get 2 chances to do it.
There you go. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.